A chef's masterpiece hid a deadly secret. Wolfe knows the truth is in the taste. Welcome to Clue Lore. I am your host, Vale. Share your location in the comments. Your messages make every mystery richer. Let's dive in. If there is a better way to start a Tuesday than with a tray of oysters and Fritz Brenner humming something Viennese under his breath. I don't know it, and if I did, I'd keep it to myself. I was in the office at the old brownstone on West 35th, the same office I had been in every weekday since the year I decided that licking stamps in a law office wasn't as much fun as dodging bullets for a fat genius. I had a pencil in my hand, a neat stack of correspondence on my desk that I intended to ignore for at least 10 minutes, and a view of the red leather chair that Nero Wolfe was going to occupy as soon as he came down from the plant rooms. At exactly 11, by the grandfather clock, the door from the hall opened, and Wolfe entered in the manner of a man crossing a border he owned. He was vast without being sloppy, tidy without being fussy, and his expression had settled into the look I'd seen 1,000 times. The look of someone who was already irritated about a future annoyance he hadn't met yet. He moved to his chair, lowered himself into it, arranged his napkin in the same slow, ritual way he might have arranged a battalion, and saw the tray on the side table. "Oysters?" he asked, as if it were a philosophical inquiry. "Blue points," I said. "Fritz thinks your morale needs shoring up." Wolfe snorted. "Fritz thinks my morale is a soufflé." "Sit, Archie. You're fidgeting." I wasn't fidgeting. I was breathing. But when Wolfe tells you to sit, you sit, if only because it saves him time describing your faults. I took my chair, watched him pick up an oyster fork like a surgeon selecting a scalpel, and waited for whatever he had in mind. One thing about living with Nero Wolfe is that you develop a sense for incoming weather. He was too quiet, and quiet Wolfe is always an omen. Either he had a case already, or he didn't want one and was preparing to defend himself against the universe. As he worked through the first oyster, the doorbell rang. Wolfe paused mid-chew. I didn't move. The doorbell rang again, as if whoever was on the other side thought persistence could dent brownstone. Wolfe swallowed, dabbed his lips, and looked at me. Insolence. "That's not on the correspondence stack," I said. "Want me to add it?" His eyes narrowed. "Answer it." "Gladly. Any special instructions? Should I tell them you're dead, away, or sulking?" "Tell them," he said, "that this is my house." I went to the front hall and opened the door. The man on the stoop was in his late 40s, crisp in a charcoal overcoat that had never known a careless hanger. He had a chef's knife of a face, long, clean, and sharp enough to make you check your pockets. His hair was iron gray and combed so carefully you could see where he had changed direction to avoid cowlicks. His eyes studied me with the reserved irritation of someone used to giving orders to flames. Behind him, a woman hovered on the bottom step, mid-30s, tall, hair under a beret, and the kind of posture that comes from carrying trays through crowded dining rooms while smiling at rich drips. She was holding a flat leather portfolio to her chest like a shield. The man said, "Archibald Goodwin." That's what it says on my tax forms. "What can I do for you besides charge you for ringing twice?" "My name is Lucien Raveux. I need to speak to Nero Wolfe." The way he said it told me he had said it to people whose first names were bigger than mine. There was a faint French edge on the vowels. Not theatrical, but there. He didn't offer a hand. I didn't offer a welcome mat. "I'm his assistant," I said. "If this is about reupholstering the chair, I'm not buying." His mouth almost smiled and decided not to. "It is not a joke." "I don't joke," I told him. "I observe. State your business." He glanced over my shoulder as if the office could be seen through me. "I will state it to Wolfe." "Sure," I said. "And I'll state my bank balance to J.P. Morgan." The woman finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "Mr. Goodwin, please, we've come a long way. From where? From a kitchen, she said, and there was a tired humor in it. That matters. Raveau's jaw tightened. He didn't like interruptions, even from allies. That told me something already. Fine, I said. Come in. But if either of you has a gun, a live chicken, or a grievance about orchids, we stop right here. They entered. I shut the door and led them back to the office. Wolfe was in profile at his tray, consuming oysters with the reverence of a man in church. He didn't look up until the visitors reached the far edge of the rug. Timing was Wolfe's little private sport. Mr. Wolfe, Raveau said. Wolfe let a silence hang there long enough to make a lesser man squirm, then turned his head an inch, which for Wolfe is practically a handshake. You are interrupting my refreshment, he said. Why? Raveau gave a small tilt of the chin, as if acknowledging a rule he considered foolish. Because I have no other choice. Wolfe regarded him. You have choices. My preference is that you choose another hour. The hour has chosen me, Raveau said. Wolfe's brows rose a fraction. I watched his face the way you watch a safecracker's hands. For the moment, something clicks. Wolfe wasn't interested yet, but he was attentive. That's step one in his scale. Sit, Wolfe said. You may speak briefly. Archie, coffee. Already on it, I said, because Fritz was a better barometer than either of us. I opened the side door to the hall and called up to the kitchen. Fritz answered with the clink of porcelain. He had heard the bell, smelled trouble, and was already preparing to meet it politely. I returned to my desk and sat. The visitors took the red leather chairs. Raveau perched rather than settled. The woman sat back, eyes moving from Wolfe to me and back, like a spectator at a tennis match who expects a fist fight. Wolfe selected another oyster. Your name? Lucien Raveau, executive chef at Maison Raveau. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me, and I didn't nod. I knew the name. Everybody in Manhattan who had ever paid $10 for a spoonful of foam knew the name. Maison Raveau was the kind of restaurant where the napkins were thicker than my winter socks, and the reviews featured words like transcendent and austere in the same sentence. Raveau had made a small empire out of butter and discipline. You are successful, Wolfe said. Therefore you have other choices. I was successful, Raveau corrected. Wolfe lifted the oyster fork, but didn't eat. Explain. Raveau drew a breath as if he had to inhale through smoke. Last night, during service, my sous chef, Evan Coyle, collapsed in the kitchen. I waited. Wolfe waited. Waiting is a Wolfe specialty. He was dead before he hit the tiles, Raveau said. The preliminary report from the hospital is poisoning. Digitalis. I whistled softly. Wolfe didn't. Raveau continued, his voice measured. Evan was 32. He was brilliant. He was also difficult, but not suicidal. The police came, asked their questions. They are still asking questions. They will ask more. They will ask them in public. Wolfe ate the oyster. Why do you come here? Because I will not allow a scandal to devour my kitchen. Nor will I allow a murderer to remain near my stoves. Wolfe's mouth turned down. You assume murder. I know my kitchen, Raveau said. Digitalis is not kept there. Not in any bottle I allow. Not in any plant I allow. It entered my kitchen from a hand. Wolfe looked at the woman. And you? She straightened as if expecting the question. Nina Coyle, Evan's sister. Raveau glanced at her with irritation and something else that tasted like guilt. That something else was interesting. Wolfe studied her face. You are not a chef. No, she said. I manage the floor at Maison Raveau. Or I did until last night. You were present. Yes. Then perhaps you should be the one to speak. Raveau opened his mouth. Wolfe's eyes cut toward him. You will be silent for a moment. Raveau shut up. If I'd had $1 for every man who had been told to be silent in Wolfe's office and actually obeyed, I could have retired to Florida and become a professional sunburn. Nina's fingers tightened on the portfolio. Evan had enemies, she said. Not the kind from Alice. The kind that smile at you across a pass and then keep the knife for later. Wolfe nodded slowly. You propose that someone in your employ poisoned him? Yes. How many were in the kitchen at the time? 8, she said, besides Evan and Chef Raveau. 2 line cooks, a pastry chef, a garde-manger, a dishwasher, a commis, and the expediter. And outside the kitchen? Wolfe asked. Plenty, Nina said. The dining room was full. Staff moved in and out. Wolfe's eyes went remote. Poisons are not administered in the moment, Miss Coyle. What was eaten? What was touched? He tasted sauces, she said. He sampled a reduction at the pass. He was drinking water. He ate nothing else, at least nothing I saw. Raveau leaned forward, defiance breaking through Wolfe's imposed silence. He had tasted my veal just 5 minutes earlier. There was no digitalis in my jus. Wolfe's gaze pinned him. I did not accuse your juice. Raveau sat back, stung. Wolfe turned again to Nina. Why bring a portfolio? She hesitated, then opened it and slid out a folded paper and a small vial, capped in rubber. Because I don't want the police rummaging through Evan's things first. They'll seize everything and interpret it in their own dull way. Interpretation may be dull because the mind is dull, Wolfe murmured. What are these? She passed the folded paper to me on instinct rather than to Wolfe. I unfolded it and saw a note written in a tight, slanted hand. Archie Goodwin's narrator brain translated it automatically into teeth marks. It read, Lucien knows. If anything happens, look in the saffron tin. E. I didn't look up right away. I could feel the air in the room change. When I did look up, Nina was watching Wolfe, and Raveau was watching Nina. Wolfe's voice was mild. Saffron tin? Nina nodded. It was in Evan's locker. I found this note after they took him away. I didn't know what he meant, but I know he was afraid. Raveau's face had gone very still. If his kitchen was a kingdom, someone had just accused him of poisoning the air. Wolfe didn't even blink. And the vial? Nina held it up. Water from his station. I grabbed it before anyone else did. From where? From his corner by the pass. It was half full. I don't know why I thought to take it, An excellent instinct, Wolfe said. But you have compromised it by handling it without gloves. I know, she said softly. I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Wolfe turned to me. Archie. Yeah. Take it to the laboratory. Have it analyzed. Not by that provincial Serling. Use our usual facility. Already thinking it, I said because I was. The usual facility was an outfit Saul Panzer knew, precise enough to find arsenic in a glass of Niagara Falls. I took the vial carefully, by the rubber cap, and set it aside. Wolfe faced Raveau. Your sous-chef wrote that you know something, do you? Raveau's eyes flashed. I know my kitchen. I know who should not be there. I know that Evan had been meeting someone after hours. And I know that someone wanted him quiet. Who? I don't know a name, Raveau said. Only that he was being pressured. It began 2 weeks ago. He was distracted, defensive. He refused to tell me why. Wolfe's lips tightened. And what would a dead sous-chef achieve for this unknown person? It would stop Evan from talking, Raveau said. Or from leaving. Or from exposing something. All are possible? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You are vague. Because the truth is vague, Raveau said. Because I do not yet have the facts. Then why not allow the police to find them? Raveau's nostrils flared. Because they will not protect my kitchen. Wolfe's voice was flat. Your kitchen is not my concern. A murder is. Nina said quietly. Evan is. That landed harder than any oath. Wolfe stared at her. I know the look he gives when someone has said a thing he can't dismiss. It was not sympathy, exactly. Wolfe doesn't do sympathy the way normal humans do. It was recognition, like seeing a tool he didn't know he needed. "You want me to find who poisoned your brother?" Wolfe said. "Yes," Nina said. "And why?" Wolfe turned to Ravo. "You want me to find who poisoned your sous chef and spare your reputation?" "I want the murderer found," Ravo said. "Reputation is secondary." "Do not lie to me in my own office," Wolfe said softly. Ravo stiffened, but he didn't contradict it. Fritz entered with coffee on a tray, his face politely neutral and his eyes full of questions he would ask me later with 3 syllables. He poured for Wolfe first, then for the guests. Wolfe waited for Fritz to leave before he spoke again. "Your note refers to a saffron tin," Wolfe said. "Where is it?" Nina swallowed. "At the restaurant, in the spice room. I checked after I read the note, but the tin was gone." There it was, the hour choosing us. Wolfe's eyes went to the tray of oysters, then away as if completing a calculation. "Someone removed it after your brother wrote the note?" "Yes." "Then your brother anticipated danger, attempted to secure evidence, and was killed before he could deliver it." Nina nodded, fighting to keep her mouth steady. Ravo said, "You see why I cannot wait for the police." Wolfe was silent for a long, measured moment. I could practically hear him rearranging the pieces in his head and deciding which ones were worth his effort. He does that in silence because he likes to show the result, not the process. Finally, he said, "My fee is high." Ravo pulled a checkbook from his inside pocket as if he expected that line. "Name it." Wolfe waved a hand after a sip of coffee. "Later. First, I must decide if I accept." Ravo's eyes hardened. A man is dead. Wolfe looked at him with a kind of weary contempt that could peel wallpaper. "Yes, that does not command me. I am not the police, nor am I an avenging angel. I take cases for reasons of my own." Nina said quietly, "What reasons could you have not to?" Wolfe's gaze shifted to her. His voice stayed calm. "You have come here with evidence. You have also come here because something has already been stolen from your restaurant. That theft touched a spice tin. Spices are not trivial to me." I felt my eyebrows go up. I didn't interfere. Wolfe was letting his hook show a little. That meant the fish was on the line. He continued, "Furthermore, Miss Coyle, your brother's note implies that Chef Ravo knows something he has not told us. I take an interest in concealment. It is an intellectual challenge and a moral nuisance." Ravo's face was a study in controlled rage. Wolfe leaned back, a mountain settling into certainty. "Therefore, I will undertake this matter on 2 conditions. First, you will grant Archie full access to your restaurant, your staff, and any information you possess. Second, you will not speak to the police about your suspicions without consulting me." "You cannot order me," Ravo snapped. "I can refuse you," Wolfe said. Ravo stared at him. Wolfe stared back, serene as a Buddha with better vocabulary. Nina said, "We agree." Ravo's head turned sharply. "Nina?" She met his eyes. "We came here because we need him. We don't get to be proud." That shut him up. It didn't make him happy. It did make him cooperative, which is sometimes the same thing. Wolfe nodded once. "Archie will go with you now. He will visit the restaurant. He will observe. He will talk. He will find which of your people can be trusted to tell the truth and which cannot lie convincingly. You will assist him." "I will," Nina said. Ravo said grudgingly, "Yes." Wolfe pointed his fork at me. "Archie, take the note. Remember the phrase saffron tin. Remember that a chef who believes his reputation secondary is lying. Now go." I pocketed the note, took the vial, and stood. "You heard the man. If I don't come back, send orchids to my funeral. They'll confuse everybody. Wolfe didn't smile. Do not be melodramatic. Be competent. That's my brand. I looked to Nina and Ravo. Let's go see the kitchen where somebody cooked a killing without leaving a recipe. Nina rose, her face pale but set. Ravo's coat flared as he stood, like a cape on an actor who doesn't know he's in a tragedy yet. We headed for the door. As I opened it, I glanced back. Wolfe had already turned to his tray, as calm as if the only disruption in the house had been a fly. But I knew better. The brownstone had been touched. A note had named a spice. Something had gone missing under Wolfe's roof of attention. That meant the game had started, whether the players were ready or not. Outside, the city air slapped me awake. Ravo hailed a cab with the authority of a man used to commanding service. Nina climbed in beside him. I slid in on the jump seat and watched the brownstone recede through the rear window. The chef who cooked a killing had lit a fire under Nero Wolfe without even knowing it. Now it was my job to find where it would spread. The cab smelled like old vinyl and newer ambition. Ravo gave the driver an address and then folded into a silence so tight you could have zipped it. Nina sat with her portfolio on her lap, both hands on it, eyes forward. I did what I always do when I'm wedged between grief and ego. I watched. You two want to brief me before we hit the kitchen? I asked. Or should I just stroll in and ask the murderer for a menu recommendation? Nina's mouth twitched. Ravo didn't. She's the one who asked Mr. Wolfe, Ravo said at last, as if identifying a contaminant. I did not invite the circus. Good, I said, because I don't juggle before lunch. What did your sous chef know, chef? He shot me a look. He knew how to cook. He knew how to provoke. He knew that he had talent enough to leave me and make noise elsewhere. That is all. That's not all, Nina said, still facing forward. He knew someone was stealing. Ravo's head turned a fraction. He didn't deny it. What kind of stealing? I asked. Product, Nina said. Ingredients. Expensive ones, small volume ones. Things you don't miss until you count. Saffron, I said. Yes. Ravo muttered, not just saffron. That's helpful, I told him. You want this stitched up neat. You don't hand me a bent needle. His jaw worked. 2 weeks ago I noticed gaps. Truffles short by grams. Vanilla paste not matching usage. Saffron tins not where they should be. At first I blamed procurement. Then I blamed staff. Evan said he would look into it. And then he looked into it hard enough to get killed, I said. Nina finally turned to me. Her eyes were dry in a way that meant the crying had either not started or couldn't stop. He didn't tell me much. He just picked at it like a scab. When he wrote that note, I don't think he knew who. He thought he was close. Close is a dangerous neighborhood, I said. Any candidates with sticky fingers? Ravo stared out the window. Not in my kitchen. That's a belief, I said. Not a fact. We'll shop for facts today. How did Evan collapse? Was there drama? Any shouting? Any final words worth putting on a statue? Nina swallowed. No drama. It was the rush. He leaned to taste the Jew at the pass. He said, too bitter, like he always did, and then he grabbed the rail as if the floor moved. He tried to step back. His eyes went wrong. Then he fell. Anybody touch him? I asked. The commis, Talia, she said, and one of the line cooks. They turned him on his side. We called 911. The police have names? Yes, and they've already been sniffing. Since last night, Ravo said. Detective Stebbins. He likes to stand too close. That's his hobby, I said. Okay. We're going to walk in like it's a normal day. Nina, you're my inside guide. Chef, you don't throw me out of windows even if I ask dumb questions. The cab pulled up in front of Maison Ravo. The place looked like money-learning manners. Frosted glass, brass that had been polished by guilt, a doorman whose suit cost more than my first car. We went in by a side door that led to the service corridors. The air changed as soon as we crossed the threshold. Less perfume, more garlic, and a bite of bleach over everything. Kitchens always smell like a confession trying to stay clean. We entered the back prep area. It was noon, so the big heat was still in the future, but the machine was already warming up. Stainless steel gleamed like ambition. Cooks moved in quiet loops, heads down. When they saw Ravod, their spines straightened. When they saw Nina, their faces softened. When they saw me, they did what New Yorkers do at a fancy restaurant. They pretended I wasn't there and watched anyway. Ravo clapped once, sharp. "Listen, Mr. Goodwin is here for me. You will answer his questions. You will be precise. You will not gossip." That last part was adorable. Gossip is the steam kitchens run on. A woman in a white jacket approached, early 40s, hair pulled tight, eyes that could reduce stock by glare. "Chef," she said, "prep is on schedule." "Thank you, Marta." He looked at me with a minimal gesture. "Marta Sloan, chef de cuisine." She shook my hand firmly. "Mr. Goodwin." "Marta," I said, "where were you when Evan Coyle collapsed?" "On hot line," she said immediately. "Left station to check when Nina shouted." "Did you see him take anything? Eat anything unusual?" "No." "Did anyone bring him a drink?" "Not that I saw. He had his own bottle." "Who refilled it?" She frowned. "He did. From the filter cooler by the pass." I nodded. 1 down. 7 to go. Nina guided me toward the pass. The stainless counter where finished plates were lined up for runners had the look of a place where 100 small battles ended every night. I saw the cooler she meant, a squat metal unit under a shelf. Beside it, a narrow station with tasting spoons, squeeze bottles, salt wells. To the right, a strip of shelving held spices in labeled tins and jars, like a library where everything is edible and most of it is dangerous if you use too much. I crouched and opened the cooler door. Inside were plastic bottles, labeled with initials in black marker. One bottle, half full, had EC on it. That was likely the one Nina had swiped. "Filter cooler," I said. "Who has access?" "Anyone in kitchen," Nina said. "Also runners sometimes, if they're in a hurry." "Meaning the dining room staff comes through here?" "Not supposed to, but yes." That widened the Tsaim circle. I stood and looked at the spice shelf. The tins were uniform, small, round, all with neat labels. I scanned quickly. No saffron. "That's convenient," I said softly. Nina's face tightened. It was on the second shelf. I remember because Evan complained about the label being crooked. "Any other gaps?" She pointed. "The white truffle salt and the Tahitian vanilla tin. Those were there yesterday morning. Someone either cleaned house after the note or has been cleaning it for 2 weeks," I said. "Let's meet the rest of your cast." We started with the commis, Talia Renz. She was young, nervous, freckles under a chef's cap, and she kept wiping her hands even though they were already clean. I helped him," she said when I asked about last night. "He fell so fast. I thought he slipped." "Did he say anything to you before he tasted the Jew?" "No, just, 'Reduce that more, Talia,' earlier. He was normal." "Was he worried lately?" She bit her lip. "He was jumpy. He'd checked the spice room, like counting, and he asked me once if I'd seen anyone take tins out back. I said no." "Did you?" Her eyes flicked to Nina and back to me. "No. Maybe yes. Maybe fear." I filed it away. Next, I talked to one of the line cooks, a thick-armed guy named Boyd who looked like he could tenderize meat without tools. He denied everything with the bored efficiency of a man who had said no to cops already that morning. The pastry chef was icy and offended that I was wasting her glucose. The dishwasher barely spoke English and barely looked at me. The expediter, a wiry woman named Lenore, was too eager to help and too careful not to. By the time I'd pinged a first pass on everyone, two facts stood up and waved. One, Evan had been counting spices, and counting meant he was counting somebody. Two, the theft wasn't a sideline. It was bold enough to pull saffron, vanilla, and truffle products right out of Ravo's sanctified pantry, and even bolder to remove the evidence tin after his death, which meant the thief, or killer, or both, was still here, still working the stations, still breathing kitchen air like nothing had happened. I leaned toward Nina near the prep sink. "Who has keys to the spice room?" "Chef, Marta, Evan," she said. "And me. But during service the doors open so people can move fast. Chef hates delays." "So anybody could walk and lift," I said. "In theory. Not in Chef's kitchen." "Yeah," I muttered. "In theory, nobody poisons sous chefs either." Behind us, the kitchen kept moving with that quiet pre-dinner rhythm, like a heart waiting for adrenaline. Somewhere in it was the person who had slipped digitalis into a man's world and then calmly wiped down their station. I wasn't done. I was barely started. But already I could feel Wolfe's brownstone logic hovering over my shoulder, asking the question he'd ask first if he were standing here. Not who took the saffron tin, but why was saffron worth killing for? I asked Nina to keep the kitchen humming while I took a look at the spice room, and she led me down a narrow corridor that smelled of onions and expensive soap. The door was steel with a keypad. She punched in a code without looking at her fingers, which told me it was muscle memory and that she had been doing this longer than her grief. Inside, the temperature dropped a notch and the smell changed to a dry perfume. Cinnamon, clove, pepper, a hint of smoke from paprika. If you've never been in a serious spice room, you might think of it as a pantry. It isn't. It's a vault. Most chefs guard their spices the way bankers guard gold, because flavor is the part of the meal you can't fake. The shelves were clean, labeled, and organized, with the same austere precision I'd seen in Wolfe's orchid rooms. Maybe that was why Wolfe had lit up at Saffron Tin. This place was a shrine, and somebody had kicked the altar. "There," Nina said, pointing to a gap on the second shelf. "Saffron." I leaned in. The shelf was wiped so thoroughly that if someone had bled here, you'd only find the ghost. No dust rings, no loose threads of spice. Whoever pulled the tin had done it calmly, not in a hurry. A thief in flight knocks things, leaves little commas of mess. A thief in control leaves paragraphs. "Show me the other missing spots," I said. She indicated 2 more gaps. Same story. Cleaned, not random. The thief wasn't grabbing what glittered. They were selecting. "Do you keep inventory records?" I asked. In Chef's office, Evan maintained a parallel log in a notebook. "Where is his notebook?" Her shoulders lifted like they didn't want to carry that question. "Police took his locker contents. I didn't see a notebook. He might have kept it off-site." "Or somebody removed it," I said. "Like the saffron tin." She nodded, jaw tight. I crouched and checked the bottom shelves, more out of habit than hope. I've learned to look low when someone thinks they've hidden high. Nothing obvious. No dropped tin, no stray threads of red saffron, but there was a faint scuff on the floor near the wall, like something heavy had been slid away and back. "What's stored here?" I asked. "Bulk salt and flour in bins," she said. She pulled one bin out for me. Flour. Another. Salt. The third had dried porcini. All legitimate, unless someone was smart enough to stash contraband inside a bin whose smell would mask it. If they were, I'd need time and a mask, and this wasn't the moment to play John Dillinger by myself. We left the spice room and went toward Ravaud's office. It was a glass-walled cube perched above the kitchen like a control tower. We climbed the narrow stairs. Halfway up, Nina's phone buzzed. She looked at it, frowned, and tucked it away. "Bad news?" I asked. Unknown number, she said. They keep calling. Since when? Since this morning. Answer next time, I said. On speaker. Unknown numbers in a case like this are seldom random. They're either press, police, or poison. At the top, Ravoud's office was as tidy as his plating. A large desk, a laptop, a couple of framed reviews, none of them the kind that says, Best New Brunch. One photo caught my eye, a younger Ravaud in whites, arm around a young man I recognized from Nina's phone's lock screen when it lit a second ago. Evan. The smile on both faces looked real enough to hurt. Ravoud stood behind the desk like a judge who didn't want to try his own son's case. You've spoken to everyone. First round, I said. Nobody tripped over a confession. That's normal. How long have you had digitalists in your building? He blinked. I don't. Not in your kitchen, I corrected. Digitalis comes from foxglove. It's also in some heart meds. Any staff on medication? Any herbs deliveries from an outside supplier that could be contaminated? I have no herbs supplier, he said flatly. We buy whole plants from vetted farms. We strip them ourselves, and no one brings medication into my kitchen. Again with the beliefs. He had the decency to flush. We are not careless here. Careless is different from criminal, I said. Let's talk about Evan. You said he was meeting someone after hours. How do you know? Ravoud's throat moved. I saw him leaving twice, not through the front, through the service door. He was watchful. 2 times in 2 weeks, I said. You follow him? I do not follow employees, he snapped, then quieter. But I notice. And you didn't ask him? I did. He said it was personal. Personal is the opposite of helpful, I said. Did he leave with anything? A bag? A tin? No, he left in his jacket. Nothing in his hands. So he might have met someone off-site to hand over something small, I said. Or to be threatened privately. Did he ever mention an offer? Another restaurant? A critic? A lawsuit? Blackmail? Ravoud's eyes went to the photo and away. He wanted partnership. He was impatient. And yes, he had argued with me. About what? About credit, he said. It came out like a bone. He felt my name eclipsed his work. He was not wholly wrong. That was interesting, because honesty from a man like Ravoud is never accidental. And your relationship with Nina? I asked, watching him. His head came up sharply. What is that question? It's a question that comes from your soprano defensiveness. You brought her here. You work with her. She's the dead man's sister. Your face says more is in that stew. His nostrils flared. Miss Coyle is my maître d'œuvre. She's valuable. Valuable isn't a feeling, I said lightly. It's a price tag. Nina had gone still beside me. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the edge of Ravoud's desk, like if she stared long enough it might confess. Ravoud said through his teeth, Archie, do not turn this into a boulevard play. I'm not, I said. Play or not, people kill for motives besides spices. I need to know all the motives in the building, yours included. Before he could retort, a knock came at the glass wall. Marta, the chef de cuisine, stood there with a face that had never delivered a gentle message. Chef, she said, Detective Stebbins is downstairs. He wants to speak to you, and he brought a warrant. Ravoud went pale. Nina sucked in air. I felt my stomach drop the way it does when a case grows legs and starts running. A warrant for what? Ravoud demanded. Marta's eyes flicked to me, then back. For the spice room and office. They say there were anonymous tips about theft. They also want staff lists, medical declarations, everything. Anonymous tips. That was a new ingredient, and it stank. I turned to Nina. You tell anyone about the missing tins besides me and Wolfe? Her eyes widened. No. Ravoud's gaze sharpened. He was doing his own math now. Someone had called the police in with theft claims right after Evan died, and right after the saffron tin vanished. Not to solve things, to widen the blast radius, to get cops pawing through this shrine, maybe to find or destroy something before I could. I picked up my phone. I'm calling Wolfe. Now. Ravaud opened his mouth. I held up a hand. Chef, you wanted help. This is help. If Stebbins is coming in swinging, Wolfe needs to know what bat he's using. I hit speed dial and waited one ring. Wolfe's voice came in like a calm door closing. Yes, Archie? Boss, we've got company brewing. Stebbins is here with a warrant. Spice room, office, staff records. Marta says they got anonymous theft tips. The missing tins just turned into a police hobby. Also, Ravo admits he saw Evan slipping out after hours twice. He didn't follow, but he noticed. A pause. I could picture Wolfe in his chair, finger steepled, eyes half-lidded, already rearranging the new facts. Anonymous tips about theft, he said. How convenient for someone. Archie, do not allow the police to seize anything that belongs to your client without noting precisely what is taken. Make a list. On it. And, Wolfe added, voice a shade colder, find out who made the tip. The timing suggests either stupidity or strategy. I dislike both. Copy that. Anything else you want me to dislike? Only incompetence, he said, and hung up. I slid the phone into my pocket and looked at Ravaud. All right, we go downstairs. We smile at Stebbins. We let him swing his warrant, and while he does, I watch who looks relieved. We went down the stairs with the kind of speed you use when you don't want to look like you're hurrying. The kitchen felt different already. Less rhythm, more listening. When cops show up in a place where knives are tools and pride is religion, everybody hears it in their spine. Detective Stebbins was standing by the pass like he belonged there. He was tall, thin, and wore his suit the way a scarecrow wears a coat, to keep up appearances. His face had that earnest, slightly baffled look that means the man believes the world should cooperate if you show it your badge. Beside him was a uniform with a clipboard, and behind them 2 more city boys in plain clothes who had never julienned anything in their lives. Chef Ravaud, Stebbins said, as if greeting a senator. Mr. Goodwin. Detective, I said. I didn't expect to see you in whites. He tried a smile and didn't quite get there. We've got a warrant. I'm sure your attorney explained. I have no attorney, Ravaud cut in. His voice was controlled but brittle. This is my establishment. You will not turn it upside down. Stebbins held up a folded paper. We will do what the warrant permits. You can watch. Mr. Goodwin can watch, but we're doing it. On what basis? Ravaud demanded. Several anonymous calls about theft of high-value spices and ingredients, Stebbins said, and now a death potentially involving poison. We need inventory, supplier records, access to storage, and staff contact and medical declarations. That's a lot of rummaging for anonymous, I said. Any chance you tell us who called? Not at this time. That's cop for no, I told Nina quietly. She was pale, but holding herself up with something tougher than will. Stebbins nodded to his men, and they fanned out with the careful enthusiasm of people who don't know where the breakables are. One went toward the spice room. Another headed for Ravaud's office stairs. The uniform stayed by the pass, making little notes that would later blossom into big misunderstandings. I moved to where I could see the whole kitchen without getting in anybody's way. It's amazing how much you can learn by watching people pretend not to react. Most of the staff went stiff with annoyance or fear, normal in a place where authority lives in a white jacket, not a badge. Marta, the chef de cuisine, crossed her arms and wore a face that said she planned to chop the warrant into mirepoix when the cops weren't looking. Boyd, the muscle line cook, kept working, jaw set, the look of a man who'd rather fight the police than answer them. Talia, the commis, hovered near her station like a rabbit deciding whether the hawk had spotted her. Lenore, the expediter, did something else, She exhaled. Just a small release, but my eyes are trained for small releases. She was relieved. Relieved that the cops were here? That might mean she'd called them, or that she wanted them to grab something before I could. Either way, it put a star on her name. I drifted toward her. Lenore. Right. You're the traffic cop for plates. She flicked me a bright, nervous smile. That's me. Busy job, I said. Must be a relief to have a different kind of traffic today. Her smile stalled for half a beat. Relief? I just want the truth. Whoever did this shouldn't be here. Sure, I said lightly. So who did it? Her laugh was too quick. If I knew that, I'd be on your side of the line. Maybe you are, I said. Anonymous calls about theft come in this morning. You hear anything about that? Her eyes widened a hair. No. Why would I? Because you stand at the pass all night with a view of everything and a mind that counts. I didn't say that. I just nodded, filed away the beat too long before no, and let her go back to her line. Stebbins walked up to me, lowered his voice. You're working for Ravo. For now, I said. We got a toxicology request in motion for the victim. Also found something in his locker. Did you? I let surprise do a polite dance. Prescription bottle, digoxin. He watched me for the reaction. So Digitalis had a twin in a pharmacy. Digoxin is basically Digitalis in a suit. That changed the edges of the picture. If Evan had a prescription, he might have had pills on him. Pills could be taken accidentally. Pills could also be stolen and dissolved into juice. Heart medication? I said. You sure it was his? Name on bottle, Stebbins said. He had a mild arrhythmia. Sister didn't know. Nina, behind me, stiffened like she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened, then shut, the way a person does when they're trying not to believe a sentence. That makes your poison easier to source, I said. Also raises the chance of an accident. You leaning that way, detective? I don't lean until I have to. He glanced toward the office stairs. We're also seizing any notebooks or private logs he kept here. If you're holding something, now's the time. I thought of the note in my pocket and kept my face dull. If I find something relevant, you'll be the first to enjoy it. That's not funny, Goodwin. I'm not funny on police time. I kept my voice mild. Anonymous theft tips feel timely. Any detail in the calls? Stolen saffron, vanilla, truffle product. Said the victim confronted someone about it last night and got poisoned for his trouble. I blinked. That was too precise to be rumor. Whoever called wasn't guessing. They were staging. Sounds like your anonymous friend was in the kitchen, I said. Or knows someone who was. Or is someone who was. I met his eyes. If you want the killer, detective, start by finding your caller. They're either trying to help you or steer you, and I wouldn't bet your pension on help. He stared at me, annoyed at being advised, but not able to dismiss it. We will. Great. Meanwhile, any objection if I keep talking to people? Not if you don't obstruct. Obstructing is for people with time, I said. One of his men came back from the spice room carrying a plastic evidence bag with 3 tins inside. Not saffron, vanilla, or truffle salt. These were cumin, smoked paprika, and a tin labeled simply Ravaud Blend. Ravaud's face went from pale to lethal. That blend is proprietary. It's evidence, Stebbins said. Evidence of what? Of theft, Stebbins said. We found it hidden behind bulk bins, like somebody stashed it to remove later. Behind bulk bins. The scuff marks I'd seen. So someone had a little spice cache, not the missing tins, something else entirely. Something that mattered to Ravaud in a way theft didn't. Nina turned to me, voice low. Evan never touched that blend without permission. Stebbins bagged the tins and handed them to the uniform. I watched the kitchen again. This time I wasn't looking for fear. I was looking for surprise. Marta looked furious. Boyd looked confused. Talia looked scared. Lenore looked interested, like she'd just seen the plot turn her way. And the pastry chef, icy as ever, didn't look up at all. 4 ingredients in play now. Missing luxury spices, a proprietary blend stashed in secret, digoxin in Evan's locker, and an anonymous caller who knew too much. Wolfe would love this. He'd hate the mess, but he'd love the shape of it. I leaned toward Nina. I want a list of everyone who knew about that blend's location or formula. Only Chef and Marta, she said, and Evan, sort of. He'd assisted once, under supervision. So 3 people. I let that settle. And now 1 is dead. Across the room, Lenore was watching us. When she saw me looking, she snapped her eyes away too late. I smiled to myself. The cops had come to rummage, but they'd just handed me a compass. By the time Victor Talbot arrived at Maison Ravoux, the kitchen had the jittery quiet of a house waiting for a thunderclap. Nina got him at the front and brought him through the dining room like she was escorting a man to a dentist he hadn't asked for. He was mid-50s, tailored to within an inch of his soul, and wearing the kind of smile that comes from negotiating in rooms where everyone's hungry and nobody's eating. He shook Ravaux's hand with the warm confidence of someone who thinks the world is a contract waiting to be signed. He nodded at me like I was a tote bag. He turned to Nina and let the warmth linger a second too long. "Miss Coyle," he said softly. "Terrible business. Evan was gifted. I'm here to make sure no one compounds a tragedy with bad decisions." Ravaux's expression could have chilled soup. "You mean my decisions?" Talcott spread his palms. "Lucien, the police are already primed for sensationalism. If you don't manage this, it will manage you." "I have management," Ravaux said, and jerked his chin at me as if throwing a bone to a dog he didn't trust. Talcott's eyes sharpened. "So you've hired a detective?" "Temporary help," Ravaux said. "And not for your convenience." Talcott's smile stayed on, only the temperature dropped. "Then let me be direct. Evan was considering a partnership. I don't know what he told you, but he was excited about the future." Nina's voice was flat. "He was excited about not being threatened." Talcott blinked once. "Threatened? Don't play the innocent dove," Ravaux said. "You suggested persuasion, your word." Talcott sighed like a man asked to repeat a boring truth to stubborn children. "Persuasion is not coercion. I offered opportunity. Your restaurant could have been an empire without losing its soul." "Empires eat souls," I said. He looked at me for the first time like I was a person. "Mr. Goodwin, I'm not your audience." "No," I said. "You're my lead." That made his jaw stiffen. He recovered with impressive speed. "Look," he said. "The police are circling. The press will be next, and you're looking at your staff like they're a firing squad. Let's be sensible. I can bring attorneys here. I can bring crisis people. We can get ahead of this." "By turning it into a franchise pitch over my dead sous chef," Ravaux said. Talcott held his temper in, but I could see the muscle. "By making sure Evan's death isn't wasted in chaos." Nina flinched. If there were any doubt he was a shark, that line killed it. I said, "We're not deciding anything right now. You want to help? Give me your timeline. Where were you last night between 8 and midnight?" His eyes narrowed. "Is that a joke?" "It's a question. You called Evan's phone 10 minutes after he fell." "I called to check on a meeting we'd scheduled for today. I didn't know he was ill." "Then why call at that hour?" I asked. His mouth opened, closed. "Evan asked me to. He said he might need to reach me urgently." "About what?" Nino asked. Talcott's smile thinned. "About an employment situation. About leaving." Ravaux's breath came out slow and ugly. "He was leaving." "Perhaps," Talcott said carefully. "Nothing signed." Nina's hands curled on the table. "He didn't tell me that." "He also didn't tell you about his heart medication," I said, watching Talcott's face for flickers. But you know about digoxin now, I assume. Everyone does. Talcott's eyes slid to me, dismissive. Is this relevant? It will be, I said. For now, you can go, but don't leave town. His eyebrows lifted. You can't order me to stay in New York. No, I said, but the man in the red leather chair can make you wish you did. He stared. Ravoux stared. Nina stared at the floor. Talcott left with a chill behind him. It wasn't relief I felt. It was the sense that the case had just stepped out of the kitchen and into the larger world where knives wear ties. Back in the cab, I called Wolfe. I gave him Talcott's lines. The call to Evan, the smug, not-so-subtle pressure. Wolfe listened without interruption. When I finished, he said, "Bring everyone to the brownstone this evening. Chef Ravoux, Miss Coyle, Marta Sloane, Lenore Caro, and Mr. Talcott. Also, Detective Stebbins. You want the cops too? I want the correct audience. Ensure they come. If anyone refuses, tell them that refusal will be interpreted." He hung up before I could ask, interpreted as what? With Wolfe, the meaning is usually as guilt. By 8:30, the chairs in Wolfe's office were filled. It was the old ritual, and even after all these miles with Wolfe, I still get a little tickle watching people sit there as if they're stepping onto a stage they didn't know they'd bought tickets for. Ravoux was stiff and furious, dressed like a man going to his own trial. Nina looked thinner than she had that morning, grief sharpened into something almost brittle. Marta wore her composure like armor. Lenore was alert, nervous, and trying not to look at anyone too long. Talcott strolled in last, gave Wolfe an expensive smile, and took a seat like he was in a board meeting. Stebbins hovered near the door, wary of Wolfe and annoyed to be used. Wolfe remained in his chair, hands folded on his stomach, an immovable mountain contemplating insects. He began without preliminaries. "Mr. Talcott," Wolfe said, his voice mild and deadly polite, "you represent interests that want Maison Ravoux franchised. You offered the late Evan Coyle a partnership as leverage against Chef Ravaux's refusal." Talcott gave a little shrug. "Leverage is a harsh word. We offered career growth." Wolfe ignored the correction. Mr. Coyle was also investigating theft of luxury spices and, more importantly to Chef Ravoux, the proprietary Ravoux blend. Ravoux shifted, eyes hard. Wolfe turned to Marta. "Miss Sloane, you are chef de cuisine. You had access to the blend and to the spice room. You also had something else. Dissatisfaction." Marta's chin lifted. "I don't know what you mean." "You mean," Lenore blurted, then clamped her mouth. Wolfe's eyes flicked to her. "You will have your turn, Miss Caro." He returned to Marta. "Your dissatisfaction was not merely professional. You believed that after years of doing the bulk of the kitchen's labor, you deserved co-credit and eventual control. Mr. Coyle's presence complicated that. He was talented enough to be Chef Ravaux's heir and impetuous enough to make demands." Marta's face stayed smooth. "That's psychology, not evidence." "Yes," Wolfe said. "So let us proceed to evidence." He looked at me. "Archie." I stood and took a small envelope from my pocket. "Lab results on the water bottle," I said, dropping it on Wolfe's desk. "Digoxin in trace amounts, not enough to kill, but enough to say somebody dosed the station. Water." Nina sucked in air. Stebbins stiffened. Wolfe nodded as if hearing that the sun had risen. "Second, Saul Panzer visited Mr. Talcott this afternoon. He discovered that 2 wire transfers were made from a Talcott-controlled account to a private recipient over the past 3 weeks. Wolfe lifted a paper. The recipient was Miss Marta Sloane. Marta's head snapped up. Talcott's smile blinked out and back on thinner. "That's absurd," Marta said sharply. "I've never..." Wolfe raised a hand. "You received the funds. Saul verified the bank. If you wish to dispute it, Detective Stebbins will be delighted to check." Stebbins nodded once. Grim. Talcott leaned forward. Those were consulting fees. For menu development. Wolfe regarded him. You pay clandestine consulting fees to a chef already employed by the target of your overture? You assume we are stupid. Talcott opened his mouth. Wolfe cut him off. Silence! I'll say this for Talcott. Being told to shut up by Nero Wolfe is a humbling experience, even for sharks. He shut up. Wolfe continued. Miss Sloane stole luxury spices and removed tins. Not for profit on the black market. Such profit would be trivial for the risk, but to create a trail of irregularities useful to Mr. Talcott's pressure campaign. The missing saffron tin was not merchandise. It was a hiding place. He looked at Nina. Your brother wrote that note and hid evidence in the saffron tin. Evidence of the transfers and of Mr. Talcott's proposition. He did so because he suspected Chef Ravaud knew about Talcott's approach. Ravaud's mouth tightened. I didn't know about the transfers. You knew about Talcott, Wolfe said, and you were withholding it from Miss Coyle and from me. That matters because your concealment gave Mr. Coyle reason to use the saffron tin rather than confront you directly. Ravaud swallowed. It wasn't an acquittal, but it was a place to sit. Wolfe went on. Miss Sloane discovered the note, or overheard something that led her to it. She removed the saffron tin after Mr. Coyle's death and destroyed the contents. But there was one thing she could not destroy, the flow of money. Nor could she undo her next act. He lifted his eyes to Marta. You poisoned Evan Coyle. Her laugh was short and incredulous. That is insane. Wolfe's voice stayed level. You used his own medication. Digoxin is bitter. Mr. Coyle tasted the veal jus, said too bitter, and collapsed within minutes. Digoxin acts rapidly when concentrated. You had opportunity. As chef de cuisine, you handled sauces at the pass, you commanded stations, and you could approach his drink without scrutiny. Marta's eyes went wide and furious. You have no proof I touched his jus? I do, Wolfe said. He looked at me again. I pulled out a small baggie the lab had returned an hour ago and set it on the desk. Residue from the tasting spoon, Nina. Kept, I said. She didn't tell the cops she had it. Lab found digoxin on it, and a fingerprint on the spoon's handle that belongs to Marta. Clean, full, and fresh. Marta went still. The room went still with her. Wolfe spoke softly. You dosed the Jew or the spoon? Perhaps both. You also dosed his water station lightly to suggest habitual intake if anyone tested it. Afterward, you called the police anonymously to frame the story as a simple theft gone wrong, hoping evidence would be seized and muddied before private investigation occurred. Talcott sprang up. This is outrageous. You can't just... Sit down, Stebbins said, and his voice wasn't a request. Talcott sat. Marta's mouth worked. Her eyes searched the room. Nobody helped her. Nobody could. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, she said finally, and it came out like a confession falling downstairs. It was supposed to be clean. How noble, Wolfe murmured. Explain. She stared at the rug. He was going to ruin it. He found the transfers. He said he'd show Nina, show Chef, go to the press if he had to. He called me a thief. He said Talcott was using me. He was right, but he didn't know the whole thing. What whole thing? Ravaud asked, voice raw. Marta lifted her head and looked at him with something between hate and heartbreak. You were never going to let me be more than your shadow. Evan was your future, not me. Talcott offered a way out, a flagship role in the new group. My own kitchen, my own name, I took it. By stealing my spices, Ravaud said. By proving you couldn't control your own house. Her jaw clenched. Talcott said the pressure would make you bargain. Then Evan found out. He didn't just threaten the deal, he threatened me. He said he'd destroy me. So you destroyed him, Nina whispered. Marta's eyes filled but didn't soften. If he had gone public, Talcott would have walked, you would have backed Chef, and I'd be finished. I didn't plan to kill him. I planned to scare him. With digoxin in his jus, Stebbins said. with a small dose in his water. Just enough to make him sick, to make him stop. She swallowed. But he tasted the juice right after. The spoon had residue from the water I'd spiked earlier. It combined. It hit fast. I panicked. I grabbed the saffron tin. I called the police. I tried to make it look simple. Wolfe's face was a slab of judgment. Your panic is not an excuse. It is a character trait. Marta closed her eyes. Stebbins stepped forward. Marta Sloane, you're under arrest for the murder of Evan Coyle and for theft and conspiracy. When he took her arm, she didn't resist. She just turned her head once toward Talcott. You said you'd handle it, she said. Talcott's eyes went flat and cold. You handled yourself. That line made Nina flinch again, and it made me want to break a chair, which is why I don't have Wolfe's job. Wolfe merely watched Talcott the way you watch a specimen you've already labeled. As they led Marta out, the room stayed quiet long enough to hear the city through the windows. Wolfe finally turned to Talcott. You have not yet been arrested only because your crimes are of a different species. Detective Stebbins has your transfers. He will decide whether to pursue conspiracy. If he does not, your conscience may have a late appetite. Talcott started to protest, thought better of it, and left without another word. He looked smaller going out than he had coming in. Not punished enough for my taste, but this was Wolfe's house, not mine. Nina sat frozen until the door closed. Then the tears came quietly, not for the drama, but for the finality. Ravo's voice was hoarse. Evan died because of my arrogance. Wolfe regarded him. He died because of Miss Sloane's ambition and Mr. Talcott's predation. Your arrogance merely fertilized the ground. Ravo nodded once, accepting the lash. Nina whispered, He tried to protect you. Perhaps, Wolfe said gently, and perhaps he wished to protect his sister more. He chose a saffron tin because he knew it would be noticed. It was a competent choice. He paused. Competent choices, however, do not guarantee survival. She looked at him, pain and gratitude tangled together. Thank you. Wolfe inclined his head. You are welcome. When they were gone, the brownstone settled back into itself. Fritz appeared at the office door with the gravity of a man entering a chapel. Dinner is ready, he said. Wolfe rose with his usual reluctance, like a bear deciding to stand for honey. Halfway to the door, he stopped and looked at me. Archie, he said, human appetite is a complicated organ. Some seek nourishment, others seek dominion. In kitchens, as in life, the latter is often confused with the former. I grinned. So, what's your diagnosis, Doc? Gluttony for power, he said. It is indigestible. We went to the dining room. Fritz served, the beer was cold. Wolfe's mood was as repaired as it ever gets, and the brownstone felt whole again. I took a bite, chewed, and said mostly to myself, next time somebody hides a secret in saffron, I'm switching to paprika. Wolfe didn't look up. Do not be facetious. Who, me? I said. Never. I'm just hoping the next killer chooses something cheaper. He snorted once, which in Wolfe language is a complete agreement with the universe's foolishness, and kept eating.